So today I want to talk about the topic of reinventing yourself. This is something that a lot of people think about, especially at the beginning of the year, where they've been seeing a vision of themselves and they think, you know what, my daily actions, my aspirations, whatever I'm accomplishing, they see themselves at a certain place and they think, I envision myself being more. I envision myself doing more. And I feel like I'm capable of it. So where's the disconnect? And they think about, I want to reinvent myself. And that's a great aspiration. That's a great idea. But a lot of people end up approaching this wrong. And today, I want to be talking about a structured way to approach this that has real lasting value. I've had several times in my life where I've had to think about reinventing myself. Usually it has to do with a job, but it can certainly be, the people that you're hanging around with. If you have other goals that you want to accomplish and you're thinking, you know what, just the path I'm on right now isn't doing it. And they think, well, I'm going to need to reinvent myself. The last time, or let's say two times I've had to think about this, both have been professional. I think the first one would have been during 2020. Of course, COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And my career path for the previous 15 years just didn't feel like it was a viable option anymore. I waited multiple months for the world to kind of go back to normal. And when I found out, hey, that ain't happening, that was a time where I really had to think about, like, what do I attach my identity to? How do I attribute value to myself and my contributions to society around me? So that was a time where I really had to dig in and think, like, I'm not in fitness anymore. I'm not in sales anymore. Not necessarily working with customers face to face, but really thinking more about, okay, what am I contributing? What is my value that I'm putting out there? And the other time that happened more recently would have been with when I was switching over from doing my former work, doing quality assurance, into being a product manager. And that was where I really had to think about a shift in my own identity. What was my place in the workplace? How was I contributing as a thought leader, as bringing new ideas and perspectives to the table? So it was fun, but it required a real shift. I think in the aspect of today, I'm filming this in the end of January. So certainly New Year's resolutions are hopefully not dead, but people are thinking about, okay, where do I see myself at the end of this year? Who do I want to be? And so I'd like to talk through a framework that's going to work for people there, because a lot of people fail to identify that identity comes first. Before you can reinvent yourself and just say, I'm going to do X or Y. You need to think about a shift of identity first. So I would say that the core idea I want to focus on here is that most people are trying to change their life from the outside in. So they'll focus on new habits, new routines, new goals. But, change doesn't really stick that way. As I just mentioned, I'm filming this at the end of January. So let's be honest, New Year's resolutions are probably dying. Bloody deaths left and right all around me. People declared new year, new me, and they set out to the gym saying, well, that's my new habit. I'm going to be a person that's fit or works out regularly. But they didn't really do any extra work to address their identity. They just tried to attribute a new habit to themselves, and it didn't really work out like that. So, I think we need to reframe that and think about the identity. An analogy that I would often use is thinking about a plant, like big old plant back there, right? Big old leaves, that didn't happen overnight. That took time. And if I had put that plant into a small planter, that would be artificially implying that, well, this is meant to be a small plant. And that's not true. It just means if I put it in a small planter or a small pot, it's just not going to have room to grow. And I can try to muscle it or finesse it as much as I want. I can water it more, fertilize it more, give it more direct sunlight, but it's still going to hit a ceiling, right? And it's not because the plant is weak, it's because the container is too small. And that's really how identity is going to be working in this perspective. So your outward actions, you can think about those like the leaves and the branches. These are the things that people actually see, right? But your identity is really the root system. And your roots are really only going to grow as far as the container. People use this analogy all the time, talking about, I'm going back to my roots, or I'm going to be, they're settling down, like, I'm putting roots down in this neighborhood. We have a very strong connection and correlation where, like, my roots are my identity. but you need to give them room to grow. And so when people say things like, I keep trying, but nothing changes, or I can't get past this level personally, professionally, in a relationship, whatever it may be, that's oftentimes not like a discipline problem. It's a container problem. It's that planter that you're in, where your self-image is really going to be limiting how much responsibility you take on, how visible you allow yourself to be, and how much success you're willing to tolerate before you kind of shrink back from that. So reinventing yourself really shouldn't be about forcing more effort in that same container. It's about getting a bigger container and letting your roots grow and expand and really getting to your full potential. So let's talk about steps on how to make that happen. Step one is going to be identifying the stories that keep you small. Every person carries these identity anchors, and these are stories that they've learned early on, attributed to themselves, and they've never really questioned. So things like, oh, I'm just not that kind of person, or I'm bad at this, I'm not ready yet, right? I think everybody, myself included, have told these stories to themselves, and they feel like facts, but they're really not. They're more like interpretations. So your first step can't be to fix yourself with a new habit. And again, this is why people go to the gym at the beginning of the year, and that fails so frequently. They're not really addressing the stories that are running in the background. And so it helps really to be asking, where did I learn these behaviors about myself? Who taught me these stories that I now deem to be true? Are they actually true, or am I just comfortable with them because they're familiar? Talking about self-reinvention. I have a buddy out here, and he's been on this kick. He was like, oh, I just don't want to be so angry all the time. And so he's gone through a long process of trying to address that. But recently we were talking, and he said he was working on, when he feels one of these negative feelings, it could be anger, frustration, whatever, he'll acknowledge that feeling is there and then just let it go. And that was his approach for dealing with this. And I think certainly to plenty of people that sounds good on paper, but as I had told him, that sounds very much like you have a leak in your dam and you're just putting a big bucket out to collect the water that's spilling out. Like, sure, you're dealing with that on this side of it, but you're not really doing anything to plug the hole. It's a Band-Aid. You're not really addressing the story that's running in the background behind that. I would think that it makes much more sense to try to address when those feelings are coming up, taking the time to ask, like, why am I feeling this anger? Where is it coming from? Is it rooted in something real? Is this something that I can address? I'm afraid of it because I don't acknowledge it or don't think about it. I think that that's going to go much further in lasting change, understanding the stories beneath those feelings and giving them something to take action on. Step two is going to be defining the person that you want to become. Now, most people are going to be setting goals without ever really defining who they need to be in order to achieve them. So instead of asking, what do I want to do? You could reframe that and say, who would naturally do this? I think we've all had some sort of visualization exercise where we think about ideal me. Who is that picture perfect version of myself who's out there doing the things that I want to do, being the person that I want to be. So, an exercise that we can do surrounding that is to define your ideal week. And it's not some fantasy, right? You're thinking about ideal you if things were working out. And you could ask yourself, how do you carry yourself? What do your days look like? Who do you keep around you? What do people say about you? And then most importantly, what's truly motivating you? Having a strong, deep core motivator, that's going to go a long way. And don't censor it. Don't try to throttle that back. Really think, blue sky, open field. Your motivations are going to evolve as you grow. That's natural. When you give more clarity to those stories about who is ideal you and what are they doing, that's going to help expand that proverbial container that we were talking about. Step three is going to be releasing your old identity. Now, I think this goes without saying, and it feels very common sense, but you really cannot carry old definitions of yourself into your new life. At some point, you're going to have to deliberately and intentionally let go of who you've been. So again, people oftentimes will be saying, oh, I've always been this way, or I'm just not disciplined, right? That action that they're trying to take on, that's just not me. And those aren't facts. Again, those are labels that are self-assigned, self-designated to ourselves, and we need to be able to let go of those and to release them. This idea of reinvention, it's going to be requiring that your past self no longer gets to vote on what future you gets to encounter and experience and deserve. This is a very deliberate upgrade of your system. I'm working in tech. I would say that this is very much going to require you to push new code. You can't be relying on the old code. Step 4 is going to be building the new identity with micro actions. Now, I think at this point, this is where you can start taking outward actions to build new habits. And a lot of people put roadblocks in their way in this point for 2 reasons. One, they think that things are going to happen overnight. Again, relating to my days in fitness, I was still on the tail end of when The Biggest Loser was on TV, and I would have plenty of clients coming in, and they think, oh, I'm going to lose 100 pounds in 10 weeks. It's like, that just is very unrealistic unless you're on a TV show and putting 12 hours a day into this. So, people always want that magic pill, right? We want the instantaneous solution to whatever ails us, whatever problem is in our way. And we continue to learn the lesson that change is not going to happen overnight. So the other thing that people are putting in their way is that they think that change needs to be perfect the first time around, and they don't give themselves space or grace to say, I'm going to fuck this up a couple of times before I actually nail it. And so that prevents many people from starting, before even taking that first step. When you are, building these micro actions, these new identity builders, it's going to require consistent proof. There's going to be small actions that are done repeatedly, and those are going to be the things that actually update your brain. So if that ideal version of yourself that you pictured out in the future is very disciplined, you can't just immediately say, oh, well, I'm going to be this stoic master overnight. You need to do one small disciplined thing every single day and let those cumulative effects all add up. If your future self is very confident, then I would be practicing to show up every day, even if it's imperfect. Take those imperfect actions. If your future self is creative, then before you feel like you're ready, you need to go out there and actually start creating things. This could be digital art, visual, physical art. It could be writing. It could be, whatever your craft is going to be. If you think you're going to be creative, don't wait until you feel like you're ready or the mood is perfect. You got to go out and do it. Like, taking action is going to beat talking every fucking time. There's just no way around it. So that is going to be something that you do. Small steps, repeated steps, time over time, until eventually you just get to 30, 60, 90 days out and you're looking in the rearview mirror like, oh, now I see change. I actually am starting to become a different person. And that's where you're really going to be seeing progress. Another thing that we need to address when you're looking to reinvent yourself is changing your inner dialogue. So, as we just talked about, it's not always going to be a perfect road forward. You have to imagine there's going to be detours. There's going to be things that get in your way. Change is not a straight line. And when this happens, you are going to find yourself, slipping back into your old stories, your old labels. When you hit that moment, it's important to recognize this because your internal dialogue shapes your reality more than many of us want to admit. I'm, born and raised Massachusetts. I would still very much associate myself as like a Boston guy. We're not known for being the most cuddly and open when it comes to our feelings. But, I moved to California and maybe changed some of that stuff. But no, what I'm saying there is, we living in the Northeast, there's very much a story we tell ourselves like, you're maybe a little harder than other people in the country, a little bit more stubborn, a little bit maybe even a more abrasive, but we're all really nice on the inside, I promise. But if you are sitting there telling yourself like, oh, I can't do this thing, I always mess up, I'm not good at this, your brain is going to work to make that true. If you just continually tell yourself like, I suck at soccer, like, guess what? Change is going to be very difficult for you to come by. One simple shift can make a big difference there. And I will tell plenty of people, if they say, oh, I'm not confident with this thing, or I don't have these skills, just take the word yet and add it to the end of that. At work, I would say, I don't feel confident using amplitude to chart out user actions yet, right? Give yourself the space to grow. If I'm not where I want to be yet, I don't have my dream house yet. That is really, it's rewiring that narrative that your brain is telling you, and that's going to be keeping that path clear on your way to making progress. Step 6 is going to be curating your environment. So we talked about ideal you in the future. Who's around you? What do those people say about you? What are you doing in your daily life? let's be honest, you can't grow in an environment that's going to keep reinforcing your old identity. So these are the people you work and associate yourself with socially, the media that you consume. Are you doom scrolling all the time, or are you actually looking at things that are going to help you and inspire that positive change? What are your routines like? Are they creating, or I guess I would say, are they preventing you from slipping into just relying on motivation? That's not really going to work. You need to have a structure. You need to have a framework. What does your physical space look like? Are you happy? Does it make you happy? I'm enjoying simple things like just having LED lights around me, and maybe that makes me 12, but I enjoy it. So, that doesn't mean that you need to cut everybody off from your old life and just go, completely Spartan and start all over again. But you do need to be very intentional. And you should be asking yourself, does my environment support who I'm trying to become? Or is it supporting who I was? And it's a bit of a safety net. You will certainly hear people using the expression, you need to burn the boats. You really can't let yourself have that easy escape back to who you were. Your surroundings are, they're really going to reinforce the old container that you were in, or they're going to be helping you expand into that new one. And the last step that we need to be taking here is committing daily, even when it's uncomfortable. We talked about this is something that you need to show up to every single day. You are probably going to feel like shit sometime, and you're still going to have to wake up and do the things that you want to do. Cook your meals, go to the gym, play with your dog, get your research done on time. Is that going to lead to moments of doubt and discomfort, maybe loneliness, uncertainty? I would bet on it, but those don't need to be things that are going to stand in your way. That's just the feeling of what it is when your roots are expanding, right? When you're this plant and you are growing. It's always going to be uncomfortable at first. Like, you can't be afraid of the fact that the first couple times you try these things, like, you're probably going to suck at them. And that's okay. Like, you need to get past that point and give yourself more room to grow. I would really advise people not to think of reinventing themselves as abandoning who you were. It's really, think about it positively. Think about it as becoming the person that you've been avoiding becoming. So for anybody that's been watching this video and deciding that, yes, this is the time that I want to reinvent myself, remember all the way back at the beginning there, you need to start with your identity. I would try to find one story you've been telling yourself that you are ready to rewrite. Choose a narrative that you've been holding on to that you can actually address and say, objectively, that's not true. That's not bringing me forward. That's actually not helping me. Find that story and commit to rewriting it. If you have that story, if you want to share it, drop it in the comments. I'm always curious to see what people have to say about that. But remember, just like my plants, that growth is not going to happen overnight. That is okay. We just want to keep at it, stick with those habits repeatedly, and you'll be amazed what that snowball effect ends up having. So give yourself the space, give yourself the time to reinvent yourself. You're really going to enjoy who you see on the other side of that work. That's all I want to talk about for today. I hope you found some value in this video, and I will see you in the next one.